Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Thanks for hanging out. Welcome to Thursday. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We are going to talk plenty of college football, some FPI, some Nebraska Year 4 expectations. College football insider Brad Edwards with us a lot of Hour 1. We'll hit recruiting and what's in store for Nebraska here the rest of this summer and into the fall. Greg Smith. I haven't talked to Greg in 100 years. Can't wait to hear from Greg Smith. Some recruiting and football with Greg from Hail Varsity next hour. Then Brandon Vogel also will join us, and we'll dive into a lot of different things. We'll start off with some basketball and the grad transfer news in a moment. But that whole topic, do you want size or speed? Do you want talent or experience? And what happens when you get to combine both? Right? What happens when you combine that talent with experience? Good things obviously can happen, right? You talk about the NCAA tournament, and you've got your one-and-done teams that are just so crazy talented. Kids are, ready to go to the NBA, but there's first the NCAA year they have. And in years where that high-level talent pops, you get a Kansas, you get a Kentucky, or you have an old team like Frank the Tank squad of Wisconsin, right, that went to a Final Four here a few years back, or some of those Beeline-led Michigan teams that everyone on that team feels like they're 48 years old and play at the Y on Saturday morning. Well, you got an interesting dynamic and possibility for Nebraska football this year because of the talent. You know that there's talent down there, and the experience, there's not much they haven't experienced or seen, and that's a topic we'll get into with Brandon Vogel. Specifically, what can you get from Adrian? He's got the degree commercial going, right? Got the endorsement there. He'll smell all nice. Good for him. But I'm so excited to see a fourth year from Adrian Martinez. You're going to see a new guy wearing Husker scarlet and cream. That's Alonzo Verge, grad transfer from Arizona State. And this guy can ball, man. And this guy can ball. You have more options at point guard. And you have three players that I want to kind of compare and contrast here a little bit here. You've got Verge from Arizona State. Teddy is on to his fourth or fifth program here, Teddy Allen. And then you also had Delano Banton that is sticking with his NBA dream. Good for Banton. And what are you getting with Verge here? Because ultimately you're having to fill that roster spot here for the mayor. And with Banton in the NBA, with Teddy off to another program, what is the role going to be for Verge at 6'2", 170 pounds? Incredible high school talent from Chicago. Chicago Sun-Times Player of the Year. Went JUCO, went off for 30 a game at Moberly JUCO, and then was ultra dynamic at Arizona State. 30 starts, 51 games, 2 years, sixth man of the year in the Pac-12. Just shy of 40% from field goal range. This is a guy that can hit free throws per his percentage. And, what fits for him with Nebraska? Your point guard options, obviously Verge, you have McGowens, you've got Webster, you've got Bryce McGowens. You also have Koran Mcpherson here. And I love the film I watched here of Verge. His crossover is sick, is incredible at slithering to the rim. Use that high post right around the top of the key to just shake somebody off the dribble, cut through the lane, and then, granted, it was a 7-minute highlight film of makes, but he was so good getting to the rim at 6'2", amongst the trees and finishing at the rim. Does a nice job of getting downhill and accelerating. A few threes there. I kind of stopped watching the highlight tape about 4 minutes in. Didn't see a lot of assists the first few minutes. Not that he can't, because I think he averaged just shy of 4. But this guy could be instant offense for Nebraska, whether it's as a starter or as a sixth man. I think he's wanting to probably come in and start. I don't know what's been discussed. Took his official Monday, but he's a nice option for more points, more depth, whether he starts and kind of goes around the horn with this Hoiberg offense, or if he's a guy they turn to off the bench to go get you double-digit numbers.
Yeah, and from watching his highlight tape, I would have thought that he was shooting 100% on the year last year. It just seemed like he didn't miss in the highlight tape.
Well, right. You don't. A little different than football, smartass. I get it. But
no, but we have something in Isaiah Roby sent out a tweet and said he played in the same MLK Day tournament in high school as Verge, and his memory was that he's a bucket. Yeah. And, I mean, that's evidenced by last year Arizona State. He had a 41-point game.
He scored 41 of their 58 points.
Yeah, and I was looking at the Nebraska record book.
In a 40-point loss.
41 points in a game, though, would be good for the second highest output in a game by any Husker player ever. I mean, the record's 42 from Piatowski, and in second place is Alex Mark with 41.
So Piatowski went for 42 against Oklahoma. Marich lit up somebody, probably Iowa State, sound right? Or Tech? Oklahoma?
No.
I'm going to go through the whole entire Big 12.
It was K-State he scored 41 against, but
we loved it.
He also has the record for most points in a game away from home because Piatowski was in the Big 12 tournament.
Big 8.
Big 8 tournament. Yeah, you're correct. After looking, yeah, you're correct.
It was the semifinal of the Big 8 tournament.
Yeah, but Mark did 37 at Iowa State, so you were close with the Iowa State guess.
So I remember him going off against the Cyclones. That was the Collier years, or was that the Doc years?
That would have been 2006. So I think
it was the Doc years. Yeah. So Marich was in studio with us at KRNU 100 years ago. Hold on a minute. I wasn't still in college then. I'm lying. One of the basketball players was in with us.
Well, he was one of like the first basketball players I remember watching from Nebraska basketball. It was him and Lance Jeter.
Yeah, Jeter was awesome. I like Jeter a lot. So the thing here with Verge, he just has great handles, right? I mean, he dribbles so well, and you need that. But his change of direction, and if you get hedged or trapped, he can split a double team. And Coach Smith always preaches this, right? When we're doing basketball games, and he's as good a fundamental guy as there is. Do you finish off 2 feet or 1 feet? What's your balance like? Can you gather and then score? You finish off 2 feet, guess what's not happening? There's not 78 offensive foul calls as you're going to the rim. Did Nebraska lead the nation in charges last year, or did it just feel like it? Well, it felt like it. Nebraska was... they were good for 4 charges a game, right? And yet somebody spinning with their shoulder down, who may have transferred, not named Banton, and that's one thing that was an issue. So finishing off 2 feet, highly underrated. There I go. But what do you think here? You got to like this get for Nebraska. It's going to be chemistry, so important, and everyone's got to understand their role. I mean, Fred's gonna load up with your glue guy and find your rebounders. He also wants unselfish play. Great. Can everybody fit and find their role? Who's your candidate to lead the Nebraska at point guard here? And the other thing, too, is if we're talking addition by subtraction, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, I'm saying you're getting a guy that can put points on the board like Teddy, and you're getting a guy that can get to the rim like Banton. You lost both of those implements to your team, right, when they left. You get a guy that can do that and fill that void, and you get a guy that's a little bit better three-point shooter when you look at Banton's numbers. Okay, Banton had a great workout, good for him. But over 2 seasons, you've got 3-point numbers that are better for Verge than what Banton has had. It's not that Banton couldn't worked on it, gotten better this season, but this is what you're replacing it with.
Well, and what's going to be interesting for me to see is what Verge's role is going to be. I see some people on Twitter saying this is going to be our new starting point guard. I don't know. He was the 2019 and 2020 Sixth Man of the Year in the Pac-12 conference across the entire conference. Like, he's a proven commodity off the bench. He's proven that he can score effectively
does he
off
want
the
to
bench.
still do that?
That's the question.
Right.
But whenever I look, I see a starting five of Trey McGowan's at the 1, Bryce McGowan's at the 2, CJ Wilcher at the 3, most likely Lat Mayan at the 4, maybe Eduardo Andre at the 4, but I think he's more of a 5. And then you have Derek Walker at the 5 with Eduardo Andre coming off the bench at the 5. That's the starting lineup that makes the most sense to me, is the 2 McGowans, Wilcher, somebody at the 4, probably Lat Mayan, and then Derek Walker at the 5, and I see him coming in more off the bench. So I think this is it's gonna be a good test to see how far along this Nebraska basketball team has come since last year, to see where Verge slots in it. Do they put him in right at the point because he's got that experience at point guard? I don't know, but it is going to be a good litmus test to see how this young talent is coming along, to see where he actually gets placed within the lineup.
You know who I'd like to see continue to make a charge? Give me Trey. Trey at point guard.
I like that. He did well at the end of last year.
He got comfortable, and it's not that he can't do it. He's super talented. But the more you let him do it, I mean, he took Banton's minutes at that spot. He is, I'm not calling him Russell Westbrook, but he's Westbrook-like with his athleticism and his explosiveness. I mean, I think he's an insanely high-level athlete.
His first step.
Oh, God, it's quick. And he's so strong where he can take hits and finish. But I think his ability to create intriguing. So if I'm putting a lineup together, give me Trey at the point guard. Give me Bryce at the small forward.
Okay.
Give me potentially here Verge here at your shooting guard. Give me Walker at the center.
Walker at center, okay.
And then give me Andre or Lat as your 4.
Yeah, but that's what's cool about this Husker basketball lineup is really once you get past them, even the point guards, but it is positionless basketball. That's what Fred Hoiberg has been trying to sell, trying to build here. So it is cool to be able to, of all these guards, really any of them could play point guard at any given time, depending on how a game is going, how comfortable guys are as we get through the fall and into the winter, which guys just come to the forefront of being a guy who can handle the ball, because really, in Fred's eyes, it doesn't matter all that much as long as you have some guy who's effective. He doesn't care what you recruit you here for. It's positionless. John
emails in, Chris@HaleVarsity.com. Love hearing from John Harris. He nailed this. They aren't going to be running the offense through Teddy, which will change everything.
Yep.
Ding, ding. If we had a prize for best email, we're going to call the fight already and say, Brother John is right on. That didn't it feel like it? I mean, here's the catch. Here's 40 points, either volume or efficient, depending on the night. You had the offense going through, and sometimes the ball would stick. Bang. And you're going to be able to run Fred's offense or run Fred's sets. And you had moments where you were competitive. You even were hey, you got a couple more wins in Big Ten play. But it's been a tough start. I love getting a guy like Verge, but you nailed it. Everyone's got to say, yep, I'm buying into my role. Guys that returned back know their role, right? They want to win. So Verge leaving ASU, why? No, I want to go play for Fred because I'm familiar with him. When I was in Chicago, he was in Chicago.
Let's be honest. It's his last year. He's a grad transfer. It's his last shot of being able to make an NBA roster, a professional roster somewhere. So you go somewhere that's got the experienced coach that has been putting guys into the NBA.
Here's what it is. It is that NBA cred that Fred has, because 2 times Verge put his name in to leave Arizona State in the last 2 years for the NBA. And what he got back, hey, we think you're a good baller, dude, but we don't know if you stack up to where you would like to risk leaving school and hope to find a landing spot in the NBA. This is Fred. This is Fred being able to develop, and this is Fred matching up with a guy who wants to play at that next level. There's why you leave ASU.
Oh, 100%. I mean, he had a workout with the Charlotte Hornets like last week. Like, he was still trying to make an NBA roster. I'm sure he heard something, and I was like, okay, I need to go find something else somewhere else that is going to be able to allow me to take this next step.
Charlotte's like, go see the mayor. You want to be back here in a year? Go see the mayor. But no, that's 1,000% here. You've got a different. You had like a lot of alpha dogs in the locker room last year, but you had the big dog was Teddy, and it was him, and for him to move on, we want him to have success down at New Mexico or New Mexico State. I forget which it is, but I know it's a 4th or a 5th program, and it just didn't work, accepting of role. And it's not every day a guy goes for 40 or can make a bucket or a tough shot like Teddy. You've replaced that a little bit with Verge and some of the not stupid shots, but just degree of difficulty where you're able to get an opening, go up and finish. How many times did Nebraska wear you out last year with missing at the rim? A lot.
I mean, they led the country in percentage of shots that were near the rim, within 8 feet or something like that.
They got the attempt they wanted.
Yeah, but they had some of the lowest percentage of finishing.
Didn't get the finish they wanted. All right, we'll switch gears, talk some college football. Brad Edwards, college football insider, a lot of years, 25 years with ESPN. And he has a book coming out here, Dynasty by the Numbers, Bama's greatest decade run. But we'll spend time here on Nebraska, some FPI, and that discussion here of talent and experience. Hail Varsity continues.
And we're back.
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Back into it, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Let's talk some college football, some NIL, some FPI. We welcome in college football insider and author, Dynasty by the Numbers, Bama's greatest run, the best decade in college football. Brad, I'm sure I just screwed that up. Correct me, my friend, at JBradEdwards on Twitter. But your book is going to be a lot of fun for college football fans, Dynasty by the Numbers. How are you? It's July, my friend.
It is July, so we're getting close. And actually, about 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks away from at least SEC Media Days, and they're usually the first one to go off, and then other conferences to follow. So, yeah, I would say that we're getting to that time where people start to more seriously focus on college football and get excited for the season. I think maybe some fan bases are more apprehensive than excited, but at least right now everybody's undefeated.
You pretty much painted the picture here. What's the level of trepidation for Nebraska fans? We'll get into some Husker topics, and you mentioned Big Ten Media Days, or just Media Days in general. I have not had the pleasure of SEC Media Days, but I hear they're a party down in Hoover. Typically, Indianapolis is the site for this year's Big Ten Media Day extravaganza. We'll be there on site doing shows, which will be cool. But I got to ask you, have you been to Indy, and is the shrimp cocktail at St. Elmo's for real?
I have not been to St. Elmo's. I have been to Indy. I actually did an internship with the Colts when I was in college. Now I got to date myself here. This is when the Colts were absolutely horrible. This is pre-Peyton Manning. It was actually the year that they were so bad that they had the first 2 picks in the draft when Steve Entman and Quentin Coryatt went 1-2.
Brad, do we have you, bud?
You got me now?
We got you now. You just left off with Coryatt and Entman 1-2. I remember that. 90. Now it's 92, wasn't it?
Coryatt. Yeah. So they had gone 1-15 the previous year, and they ended up going. I think it was 9-7. It was 9-7 or 7-9 the season that I worked for them. But yeah. So in other words, I have been to Indianapolis, and I think I was there 2 other times. Once for a Big Ten championship game, and I believe once for a women's Final Four when I was with ESPN.
Okay. Well, so what are the Brad Edwards recommendations? I guess is what I'm asking from what your memory serves.
I would. Let's put it this way. If I go back there again, I will have to try St. Elmo's.
Okay.
When I was there before, I was always on some sort of plan where I had a what would be the best way to describe it? A per diem,
sure.
I guess, where anything I didn't spend on food, I got to pocket. And I think you have a lot of listeners who will appreciate this. It's like when you're going to get, let's just say, $48 a day for food, you go get fast food as many times as you can, and then you save the rest of it, and then you go buy a game for the Xbox or something like that when you get home. So that's that was my MO back then. I wasn't really concerned with fine dining as much as I was saving up money.
That makes sense. I'll take the 2-for-1 deal. And look, Brad is $45 for Tuesday already. How is this NIL gonna be entertaining or interesting in your eyes down, not just across college football, but the SEC well? We all know how competitive the SEC is. Do you see it helping some of the mid-range programs, and I'm using that mid-range term with all due respect? Can it make a dent when it comes to attracting talent? I look at some of the stories this week. I look at Miami, a big boosters giving the football team, I think $500 total investment of just shy of $550,000. He's a gym owner down in Miami. Yeah. I look at Uncle Phil at Nike, Phil Knight, and Thibodeau is partnering with Tinker and Phil, the guy who did the Air Jordans, of course. That's pretty unique and really cool for Oregon with how they kind of reinvented and separated themselves with the wardrobes right on top of the Chip Kelly Blur style. Now, what are some things you think could happen down in the SEC? Bama already develops you, and you're really good anyway to go there. So they've been killing it without NIL. What's Bama's plan of action in your mind, and also what are some other options for schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think whether it's Alabama or any of the other top programs, the question is this going to affect what to this point has been the predictability of recruiting, which is that the best players want to go where they're going to have the best chance to get to the next level. And obviously Alabama, Ohio State, and a few others. Are there any now that might say, hey, that's less important to me than being able to make a few $1,000s more while I'm in school? Now, I think a lot of us have to put ourselves back in that mindset of when we were 18, 19, 20, and, $2,000 meant a lot more to us back then than it might today. I'm not saying it's chump change today. I mean, for some people it is. But I just have to remember, what would I have thought at age 17 or 18 if someone was telling me that I would get $2,000 for this compared to what I would think of it today. Mm-hmm. And that's where you hope that, that all these kids, and I know it's not the case for all of them, but you hope that they have people who have that greater perspective, who can kind of advise them on short-term versus long-term, and to make sure they're doing the things that are, best for their long-term interests. But one of the things that I think that we'll have to see how it shakes out is, does big program automatically equal big money? I've seen people debate, a USC, for example, versus,
Brad, you cut out right after USC. Can you reset for us?
Yeah, so I'll try to clean that up.
No, that's fine.
So what I think is going to be interesting is, whether a program in a big city, I mean, I guess the ultimate example of this would be USC, compared to, someone more like an Alabama or let's just say a Georgia that are located in a real college town. Maybe Georgia's a bad example because they're not too far from Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Is it going to make a difference? Because on one hand, you'd say, all right, you're going to have all these opportunities if you're in a big city. But on the other hand, if that big city already has professional athletes that are more marketable, is it really going to make that much of a difference to you to go to a place where there are a lot more people? I don't know. I think ultimately what we're going to see is that there are going to be a whole lot of players in what we would consider non-revenue sports, outside of football and men's basketball, that are going to do really well off of this. And I don't mean an entire roster of them, but I mean some select play, and they might not all be All-Americans, but for one reason or another, they're very marketable, and I think that's the reason that this needed to happen. Mm-hmm. It's because for certain people, the greatest marketability they will ever have in their life is while they're in college, and it has always struck me as completely un-American to deny someone the opportunity to capitalize on that. And so, we'll see what happens there. You mentioned the Miami situation where the gym owner is giving everybody on the team a certain amount of money. Whether that's a lot of money to him, I have no idea. Obviously, that wouldn't be a lot of money to someone like Phil Knight. But I've always thought that people who have made a lot of money, they didn't get there by being stupid or by being irresponsible, when it comes to money and budget. And so while there might be a few people, whether they're legitimate businesses or whether it's just a booster who's trying to help recruiting, they may go over the top a little bit here the first year or two, but I think eventually what you're going to see is that there's just not a lot of value in going after unproven players. Because we all know there's so many 4- and 5-star recruits out there who everyone expects to be the next All-American, the next first-round pick, and a lot of them just don't pan out. That's just the way it's always been. And so if you're a business, do you want to roll the dice and make a big investment in someone like that, or do you want to wait and see, okay, who ends up being that proven commodity, and who can I invest in, who I might be able to sustain a relationship with once they go pro and become an even bigger deal. And so I just think there's so much that it's going to have to work itself out over the next year or two that there are a lot of reasons to be concerned with some of what we're seeing right now and whether this could end up being a complete fiasco. But I think eventually it's all going to work itself out, and it may end up operating very differently 2 years from now than it is at the moment.
College football insider Brad Edwards with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. His book is coming out here in the early part of the fall. Dynasty by the Numbers, a look at Bama and Saban's run. Well, Brad, hang on with us here for another segment here coming up. We'll dive into some Nebraska and where he thinks the Big Red could shake out. The new reconfigured FPI is out. Nebraska was 46 when it was initially released. They're now below the top 50. There's been some tweaks here, and we'll get into the experience and talent side of things. So more from Brad Edwards, college football insider, 25 years with ESPN, Stats and Info, and, of course, ESPN Radio. Reminder about West Blue Realty. Listen, the housing market in Lincoln is phenomenal. It's also difficult to find that home potentially because there's so few of them, right? Let an expert or two make all the difference in the world for you with West Blue Realty. I'm talking about Tom Luby. I'm talking about Kelly Hofschneider. Give them a chance. Give them a ring at West Blue Realty. Tom Luby's number at 402-540-3768. Kelly Hofschneider, 402-202-2312. They specialize in residential home sales in Lincoln and the surrounding community, and they can make your move in 2021 painless. You mentioned Hail Varsity, and they can provide you up to $1,000 on the closing of your next home purchase. So log on today with West Blue Realty, westbluerealty.com, or real easy to go pay a visit to Tom Luby or Kelly Hofschneider today at West Blue Realty, 1120 K Street, Suite 200. A busy second hour on the way. Greg Smith will dive in to Nebraska and, again, losing out on a couple of Omaha prospects. That's not necessarily shocking, but it's now a reality. Brandon Vogel coming up, hour 2. And more Brad Edwards, college football next with Hail Varsity.
Chime in, 402 888-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Few minutes here. Brad Edwards with us, college football insider and author, Dynasty by the Numbers, with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. You can follow Brad on Twitter at @JBradEdwards. Brad, there's an updated FPI ranking out. You have some changes, some amendments, and shifting. Mississippi State now just inside the top 25 versus being number 8. Miami's up there in the top 10. A lot of love for Iowa State and Oklahoma. Ohio State's there. Let's get into margin for error, right? And let's talk about that. And I know that's part of the FPI calculation. When we talk about error, we talk about turnovers and special teams, hidden yardage, all those things that can make things a lot closer. One example last year, I thought Indiana was a really good football team, and they were one of the few teams to really push Ohio State. You go dig into that a little bit. That was probably, aside from the Northwestern outing, the worst game for Justin Fields. You have turnover issues, and that's how you have a closer ball game. You have a 14 to 17 point spread, and next thing you know, Ohio State's double-digit lead is a drive away from either tying or losing the game. But you know what? There's just a certain gap, and if you help another team out, that gap closes.
Yeah, and that's the way that it's always been. And you know, we had all the excitement in recent months over the presumed expansion of the playoff, and you know what that would mean for the sport. And everyone gets excited over the idea of, you know, maybe a number 8 could upset a number 1 at some point, or a 7 over a 2, and it will occasionally happen because of stuff like that. You know, where the 1 or 2 seed just goes out and makes a lot of mistakes they don't typically make, and the other team plays really well. But for the most part, in most seasons, there is a pretty big gap between whether it's the top 2 and everyone else, or the top 3, top 4. But there's a very select group of teams that typically have a talent edge over the rest of the country. And where that will prove to be this year, I don't know, but my bet is it will be a number 4 or smaller. And so you get beyond that, and then you've got another cluster of teams that are, you know, approximately number 4 or 5, all the way down to about, 16 to 20, that there's not a whole lot of difference between them. And then you get this other group where you get, you know, from somewhere around number 20 to 25 all the way back to 65 to 70, where there's not much separating those teams. And, you know, ultimately everyone, you know, makes judgments on how good teams are based on their record. But a lot of times just the difference between being the 9-3 team and the, let's say 5-7 team, is, what you were saying. It's inopportune turnovers. It's injuries at the wrong position, or a string of injuries at one position. There's so many things that you can't control that either go into the good luck or bad luck category that often dictate why one team ends up appearing to be a lot better than another team that's pretty even in talent. And I think that's what the fun thing is with these seasons. It's not, okay, who are going to be the best 4 teams and who's going to make the playoff. I mean, as much as we wish there was a lot of mystery there typically isn't. It's the next 2 tiers, that I mentioned. It's filling out the top 20 or 25. It's, who has a winning record versus a losing record. That's where those fine margins come into play. And as you know all too well, that's kind of where Nebraska's found itself for the last decade or more, is, in those fine margins where, there's not a whole lot separating that winning record and being a bowl team from, being worse. And obviously the idea of just being a bowl team has for most of Nebraska's history kind of been assumed. And the fact that they've gotten to the point now where there is doubt and even a mild degree of excitement over having that winning record, I think I think it's it's obviously a big adjustment for a lot of people who've been following the program for a long time.
Brad Edwards is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, and Brad, a season is so unpredictable, but when we had Phil Steele on last week, he kind of broke down his college football preview, and we learned that he has put Oklahoma and Ohio State both in his top 4. Both those teams are on Nebraska's schedule this year. Oklahoma's at number 1, Ohio State's at number 3, according to Phil Steele. But I just want to get your take. How much stock should we put into these preseason polls?
Well, as you know, one of the major things that goes into them is how many players are coming back. And while you consider that to be very meaningful at the moment, we really don't know how well that's going to hold up. I mean, you are going to have injuries, in the first few weeks of the season that'll change the face of some of these teams. And then, in some cases, you'll have a player who people are making assumptions about that turns out to be either much better or much worse than people had assumed. And so there are all sorts of variables that always go into this to dictate, whether a team is truly a playoff contender or whether they end up in that next tier where they're just kind of hovering around in the top 20 for most of the season. And so, Ohio State they've done this for so long that you just feel like it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They've got so much more talent than most of the teams on their schedule that it would pretty much be impossible for them to lose more than 2 games. That's the way it's felt for a long time now, and it's obviously been a long time since they lost more than 2 games in the regular season. So I would expect you have more of that from them. And then Oklahoma, while I think they have some competition in the Big 12, they've obviously owned that league for I don't know, was it 5 or 6 in a row they've won now, and have a really talented offense and a defense that appears to have improved a lot over the last couple of years. So I think they have to be the favorite to win the Big 12, but are they untouchable? I don't think so, and then that's where I see a difference between Oklahoma and Ohio State. Like, it's as great as Oklahoma could be offensively, up and down the roster, both sides of the ball, they don't have the talent and certainly not the depth that a team like Ohio State has. And so I don't know that Oklahoma would be able to survive certain injuries as well as the Buckeyes might be able to. But unless they have some bad luck, I would expect both of those teams are going to be right there in that playoff door at the end of the season, knocking on it.
We'll hang out with Brad Edwards. One more segment, some final thoughts from him on Nebraska in 2021 and what year 4 holds in store for Nebraska. It'll be interesting to see, how the season starts with Nebraska and Illinois, how monster that game is. And then as you fast forward here, kind of your final hurdle before you're back into Big Ten play is the roadie to Norman. The Uncle Andy party bus is headed to Norman. Can't wait for that. But seriously, where do you go from, what type of performance and effort do you get against Oklahoma? What's the final margin there? And then by the time you get through Michigan and a Northwestern, you got Ohio State looming. How much better did you get from Oklahoma to a second crack at a playoff team at Ohio State? We'll wind up with Brad Edwards next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Couple more minutes. Brad Edwards with us, college football insider, Hail Varsity Radio. Brad, we talk about different parts of Nebraska, the margin for error, the expectations, the fan base, the passion. You've been to Lincoln a few times. You were in studio with us. How do you compute the sellout streak? As a guy who's covered college football on a national level, what does Nebraska's sellout streak mean to you? What's your impression of it? I say that because there's some concern with if it can hold up based on what many people look at as a tough season ahead.
For most people, I think it's an example of just how hardcore and loyal that fan base is. And the fact that they are so far removed from the glory days, I hate to say that, but I think that the facts speak for themselves. and that the streak hasn't ended yet. I think it says a whole lot about Nebraska fans and how much they support their team and they love the program, even when they're not competing for championships. I'm sure you could play devil's advocate and say, well, there's not as much to do in Nebraska as there might be in some other places, and that's part of the reason that the streak has continued. And I would say, you know what, that's true, but it's also true for a number of other places around the country where they don't have a sellout streak and certainly have not managed to keep the same level of fan engagement despite some down years. So I think it says a lot. I don't know. It's tough because this is what, year 4 with Frost. And so you got a coach who is one of your own. Year 4 is obviously that year where most of the roster is now made up of his own recruits, and that is typically when most people would say that if a coach can't get it done in year 4, I mean, unless there are some serious extenuating circumstances, then if he's not showing progress by year 4, then there's every reason to wonder whether it's going to happen. And so I think this is going to be a year where you're going to potentially learn a lot about where this program is likely to be over the next 2 or 3 years and beyond. I have no idea what the expectation is. You could tell me a lot better, but I look at the schedule, and you mentioned, or Elijah mentioned, the games where are probable losses, Oklahoma and Ohio State, and then there are a whole lot of other games where there's certainly the possibility they could lose. I mean, let's put it this way. That you've probably played this game on the air. That's a win, that's a loss, whatever. There aren't a whole lot of games on that schedule I look at and I say, that's a win.
You're not
there are
using
a bunch of them where I say could go either way.
Well, it's in pencil, not ink, Brad. When you fill out the old garage schedule, right? The old Husker poster in your garage. Usually it's ink. It's all pencil this year. And Brad, last thought here, Dynasty by the Numbers. Where can folks get your book?
Yeah, so the website is going to launch. I'm trying to think what the day is. I believe it's July 19th, whatever the Monday is.
Okay.
We're gonna launch the website and open for pre-orders. If you are a fan of college football history, or you happen to be an Alabama fan living in Nebraska, the website name it's not active right now, so don't bother going there. But it's going to be BamaDynastyBook.com is where it can be ordered, and then we should have the books at the very beginning of August to start shipping out.
Well, awesome work on this project. I can't wait to read it. And thanks for talking some ball with us. We'll do this again soon.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it, Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. We will double up on Hail Varsity Insight here. Greg Smith in a moment. Brandon Vogel here in about 20 minutes. Numbers to get in, 466-377-6800. 825-5865. Find and follow us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio. Chris Schmidt at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel, and at Greg Smith HV for Greg Smith. Greg, what's up, man? I know it's the dead period. You're always working, though, man, and it's time to toss some recruiting here. I haven't talked to you in forever. How are you?
Yeah, it feels like it's been quite a long time. I am very well. I'm excited. It sounds like I'm hitting leadoff for B. Vogel, so that's always a fun time as well. So,
how many stars on a 3 through 5 scale would you give your vacation, your roadie?
A 5. It was very busy, but 5. We basically fit 4 vacations in one. We hit San Francisco, Half Moon Bay, Yosemite, and then we did Lake Tahoe. So we did a lot.
Did you go to the Corleone residence?
We did not, actually.
Okay. I don't know if that's like a real thing or it's just, movie magic where there's the Corleone compound that's really, truly not far from Lake Tahoe. So I had to take a stab at it.
I mean, maybe next time. So I think it's somewhere we're going to have to go back to because we didn't get to spend that much time there. So if we do, I will definitely take a look to see if it's movie magic or not. Greg
Smith on assignment combing the western part of the U.S. for Nebraska prospects. So, Greg, a lot to get into. I want to dive in, though, to just the topic of Omaha, and I don't want to wear you out with it, but just your reaction and thought here with – Nebraska. It's not like Nebraska's done bad in the state. It's not like Nebraska's done bad in Omaha. But when we talk recency, it's not good. Deshaun Woods off to Missouri, Micah Riley Ducker off to Auburn, and it doesn't sound like any of the other Metro kids may find their way to Lincoln. Does Nebraska have an Omaha problem?
It seems like they have an Omaha problem this year. I think that one of the things about this, and I think you're right off the top there, is that Nebraska has not been bad recruiting in-state. I think that they've been pretty good, but it's like recruiting is kind of a what have you done for me lately business, right? And that's kind of how fans view it, and in a lot of ways, rightfully so, especially when you have multiple guys, 4 of them in Omaha that are surefire Power 5 guys, and you're going to lose them all, and you pretty much knew you were going to lose them all for most of the entire cycle. That signals something to fans. And so I don't know if they have an Omaha problem in general or if it's just an Omaha problem this year. But the good or the bad news is we're going to find out real soon because 2023, things are going to continue rolling around the state.
Who are some of those 2023 kids that are on your radar and are, getting national looks? Give us a refresh real quick.
Yeah, so obviously Nebraska has 2 of them in their 2023 class that started off, and Ben Brahmer, the tight end out of Pierce, and then Gunnar Gotola, the offensive tackle from Lincoln Southeast. Then also at Lincoln Southeast for 2023, you have outside linebacker Tatum Tuioti, son of defensive line coach Tony Tuioti. And then you have from Elkhorn South, defensive end outside linebacker Maverick Noonan out there. I think Sam Sledge also in that class from Creighton Prep, who's I think is going to get more looks as well. But Noonan and Tuioti are definitely getting Power 5 looks already from around the country. And those 2 are really going to be a big deal for this upcoming class. Well,
and you have the name Power along with their exploits on the football field, so that makes lots of sense. When it comes to this first Friday Night Lights, Greg, what were your expectations as we talk now? You have 7 total commits on July 8th, and you went all in early for that first Friday Night Lights in June. You do have some commits. You've done a nice job there. I mean, you got Page, you got Applegate, you got Hayes, and you got Torres. Those are nothing to sneeze at. But you also don't have the ability to close the deal. Nebraska was all over Ashton Craig really, really early on him. Well, he ends up saying, I'm going with Notre Dame. You got Nico DeLavalier saying Arkansas is where my heart's at. And then Justin Williams and James Montz on top of Landon Sampson going to South Carolina. Any of those non-gets surprise you?
The James Montz one definitely surprises you as kind of a legacy at a position of need in this class, cornerback. I still think that they need a pure cornerback that Nebraska had put a lot of resources in. Like, they had recruited him hard all along. It wasn't like he just popped onto the radar late here, right? We had been talking about Montz for quite some time. I think that he told me coming out of that visit from Nebraska that he left Lincoln as Nebraska being his leader. And so either that was just kind of, the old visit high, or, Indiana really found a way to make that comeback at the end. That one was definitely surprising. I think not being able to close on Landon Sampson, given what we thought was the situation between Nebraska going all in on him early versus him kind of waiting on Ohio State, and then for him to get South Carolina kind of off the radar and then commit to them quickly was kind of surprising as well. Actually, the Justin Williams one, I got to think about it. Nebraska really liked him in the beginning. He was telling everyone, including Nebraska, that he was going to wait until the season, and then that West Virginia visit happened, and all of a sudden that changes after he took that trip to Lincoln. So a few of them actually were surprising and all tough in their own way for Nebraska's class.
Yeah, I want to focus on Montz here for a second. And it really seemed like, I mean, he was saying even Nebraska was the leader, and that's what my takeaway was here. What do you think the difference was from Indiana? Do you have a read into that, why he picked Indiana?
Yeah, I think what kind of happened here is that Indiana has a pretty good track record with players from Florida. Like, they've got some guys on the team that have been kind of in starring roles from that state. They've got a couple of assistant coaches that have done really well down there. And then Tom Allen is a guy that I've always kind of liked, and he's done a good job of selling his vision. And their program kind of being viewed right now as on the rise. I think it's a combination of all of those. And then maybe he just clicked a little bit more with some of the guys that are in that 2022 Indiana class, which is actually pretty good, led by Deshaun McCullough, who's like a top 100 kid after his dad ended up being an assistant coach there.
So, Greg, where does Nebraska go now at that cornerback spot now that they know Montz is out? Who are the next list of guys?
Yeah, I think the first guy up for me is Avery Powell, who's a kid who took an official visit to Nebraska during June and kind of came away really liking Nebraska out of New Jersey. He's a little bit smaller than most defensive backs Nebraska has recruited under Travis Fisher, but he's still a pretty good player. I think Jaden Magnum is a kid that could play either cornerback, safety, or even wide receiver at the college level. I think his best fit for Nebraska would be defensive back there in the mix with him. And then I think beyond that, you may end up seeing Travis Fisher kind of unearthing some more talent here. He's done a good job of that during his time here. I think he gets the benefit of the doubt moving forward to be able to do that. But you don't have anyone that I feel right now is just a slam dunk to land in Nebraska's class at the defensive back position.
Greg Smith is with us. We're talking recruiting. Hail Varsity Recruiting Insider at Greg Smith HV on Twitter. Greg, want to go back to the Florida connection. You've got the Central Florida street cred with Florida kids down there. Nebraska and this staff now up here. It's going into year 4. So it still has, I'm sure, a pretty powerful shelf life down in Florida. But the longer you're not in postseason action, maybe that kind of wears off on Florida kids. Flip it back to your comment about Tom Allen, former South Florida defensive coordinator under Leavitt. Great connections down there. But also Charlton Warren, right? We covered Charlton when he was in Lincoln in Pelini Secondary. Did an amazing job there. Warren's now the DC at Indiana. Does it come down to Nebraska just having, it's not that they haven't landed Florida kids, they just haven't kept Florida kids? I mean, is that a tactic? I'm not saying Indiana used, but it wouldn't shock me if other programs don't use it, because Nebraska can get a kid from Florida. Can Nebraska show that they can develop a kid from Florida?
Yeah, I would be. I don't know if Indiana specifically used it, like you said, but I would be stunned if teams were not using that on the recruiting trail, because it's kind of unavoidable at this point, right? So if you're going to a kid, you're going head to head with Nebraska, you could say, hey, maybe they can sell you, but they don't know how to use you, and oh, by the way, we're winning more than they are, if they are, in fact, and then that ends up being pretty powerful. So yeah, I do think that can be an issue, and those are the two big factors in that with Florida, is that you've got to be able to keep these kids here. You've also a 3 factor. You got to be able to keep them here. You've got to be able to have a development path for them where you can start to have some more of those success stories. And Nebraska has to win, because what ends up happening is you can't say to a kid, hey, we want you to come to Nebraska from Florida. It's a total different way of life, and then have them both riding the bench and not winning. Like, that's a tough sell. So
if Florida isn't the recruiting Greenland that it was a few years ago under Frost, if they're struggling to keep the guys around, what states does Nebraska turn to try to create a recruiting hotbed, if you will?
Oh, it's Georgia. I think that the one that has emerged is kind of the same time. Like both Georgia and Florida had been recruited heavily by this staff really since the first day they got here. Like, they went out and made a point to try to recruit kids from both states. There's been a lot more success, it seems like, with kids from Georgia, and that's really starting to spread. Plus, there's just so many players now. We've talked about this here before. Like, the explosion of players in the Atlanta metro area can sustain a program by itself, as you see Georgia Tech trying to rebuild that way as well. So I think it's Georgia, but then I also think beyond that, it's also refocusing on the Midwest. Like, that sounds kind of crazy that you would have to say that that's secondary for a school, but that's already in the region. But Nebraska has always had to recruit nationally, but Midwest talent has been so strong in recent years and is continuing in future years that I think Nebraska continuing to look at that will also pay dividends down the road.
We got into an interesting topic last hour with Brad Edwards and something he threw out there, predictability of recruiting, and it was in reference to NIL and, how do you change behavior with the predictability of recruiting? That means your top dudes are going to Bama. Bama just got the 5-star rush end, and they beat Clemson out. But guess what? It was an arm wrestling match between Alabama and Clemson. Right. Predictable, right? So, what if you were to give me what's predictable about Nebraska in a good way with their recruiting, what is it? Because I'm fascinated by this term. And for years, to give you an answer, predictability of recruiting was Amon Green was going to get recruited by everybody. Amon Green was not leaving the state of Nebraska. You fast forward 25 years, things have shifted. Your story and feature in the Hail Varsity Yearbook's incredible on kind of there's no more border, obviously, with technology. But, what's predictable in a good way about Nebraska with what they're doing on the trail, with what they're doing when it comes to evaluation?
Man, that's a great question, because I think that the two things that really came to mind is one thing that they're trying to change, but it's still kind of good, is that prospects telling, like me and others, that they are just wowed by what they find in Lincoln and in Nebraska in general, and I think that can still be used and can be a good thing, especially if Nebraska starts to continues to elevate the program and really gets it to a winning program again, and that becomes a little bit less of a surprise, but just something that guys talk about, that, hey, that's actually a great place to go. I think that is something. But when it comes to evaluation, like, I can always count on Nebraska to be able to find the right guys to recruit, whether it's under the radar guys like Ashton Craig, what we were talking about earlier, who then blow up and become Notre Dame commits in a school that's great at developing offensive linemen, or it's guys like Isaiah Umpaka, the defensive back out of Iowa, who's probably going to go to either Ohio State or Clemson. Like, Nebraska was his first offer and had him on campus a couple of years ago. Like, Nebraska's really good at identifying those guys early. Like, I can always count on that. It's whether or not they're able to stay in the fight and close on them. Same with a kid like Jaron Kanak that was in this current class as well.
So they see what they see on film, and they see it earlier, either through connections or just working harder, and they'll make that initial relationship move and start developing there. But when push comes to shove, they're just not winning enough ball games. Fair?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, because I think, and I really even think it's not even, and sometimes you hear that and you think, oh, they've got to be, winning conference championships or in the college football playoff. I don't think it has to go that far. Nebraska just needs to be competitive, and I think that they'll be able to land more of these kids, because they're great at building relationships and, like we were saying, identifying those guys early. I think there's a lot of room to grow within where they could go, like if you look at overall class ranking and all of that, but you've got to make those strides on the field before those kids will continue to entertain you longer in the process.
They just got to be better on the field. That's kind of really the deal maker for him, isn't it? It's not that the coaches aren't connecting. It's not that the visits aren't great. It's not that the passion's gone from the fan base. All of that still exists. It just kind of comes down to being 7-5 or better and being somewhere on New Year's Day.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like that's going to be a dominant storyline as we get, closer and closer to the season. I feel like that's going to continue to come up. And actually, in fact, something I have going on site today kind of talks about that, is that the guys that are going to turn this thing around are already here on campus. And that getting turned around with those guys is what's going to lead to better recruiting.
No, right on. Greg, what else you working on aside from that turnaround here? Got about 30 seconds, bud.
Yeah, I'm going to look here coming up in a few days at some of the camp standouts from this season. We talk a lot through June about the various one-on-one workouts, Friday Night Lights, all the camps that the coaches went out to. Like, who were some of the names that kind of emerged during that time and got on different radars? I'll be looking at that here in a couple of days.
Well, can't wait for it. Greg, we'll check in soon. Thanks for jumping in today.
Hey, thanks as always, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too. Appreciate him. We didn't even get to talk grilling. We didn't. I mean, we left it out Maybe we'll have to go there with Vogel. We need to do some sort of Vogel, Greg, Schmidt Grill Fest. I'll propose that. Brandon Vogel's next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Working through a Thursday, it's Hail Varsity. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery, Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. So we will do a second steak and a beer bet, double or nothing in 15 minutes. The pride of Chicago, to guide us, Daddy Burke, is on vacation, which means he's on some sort of mini yacht in the Great Lakes up in Wisconsin. Allergic to the sun, but that's okay, is Brandon Vogel. Vogues, did you... Well, let me ask you this. Have you gotten out into the sun a little more this summer?
No, probably less, because there's much to do inside, unfortunately, with a 9-week-old, and it's so hot that taking him outside, it becomes a no-go pretty quickly. So remains a work in progress. I'm afraid I've backslid even from my normally sun-free summers.
Because the sun is evil, beaches are dangerous. And I'm sure where you have your barbecue pit, it's well shaded. Fair?
Yeah, the barbecue pit is well shaded, and yeah, I'm still mountains over beach guy.
Well, that's okay. Where are you at here with Nebraska? We've had a good show, a fun show with Brad Edwards and Greg, and interested in your take here with, well, not just production, but the topic here of experience and talent. We dove into it a little before in hour one. And do you think Nebraska has enough of both to be a true difference maker here this 2021 season? There's a lot of teams that have talent, some more than others. Every team's going to have experience because of the super seniors, right? But it's not always you get an opportunity to have guys like a Ty Robinson, like a Rogers, like a Henrich, and I'm talking about some of Nebraska's younger guys, really play well, and then they're underclassmen anyway. But to get paired with a JoJo, to get paired with a Stilly, and get that bonus year, that's one reason I think Nebraska fans are pretty excited defensively. Do you see that being an advantage for Nebraska when you look at some of the other West squads?
Yeah, they've got a bit of an experience edge. As you kind of alluded to, the curve there is a little bit different this year because of the super seniors. But remove that from the equation for the Huskers for a moment, and they've been pretty careful with their redshirt decisions. Obviously, last year was kind of a free roll for everybody, but they need to have an experience edge, I would say, going into year 4. Like, they've kind of built towards this. They haven't, played their wild cards when they could have at certain times with younger guys. And I think when you look at what Nebraska brings back, that's good. It gives you a kind of a leg up, certainly defensively, over most of the rest of the division. What I think Nebraska to take another step needs is for some of those guys who have been in the program 2 or 3 years. Some of the players you mentioned, Ty Robinson, we've seen more of him than somebody, but somebody like a Xavier Betts or somebody like that, where you can't really, you can't say with backing it up with too much concrete evidence that, like, oh yeah, he's going to have a huge year, because he's only, appeared in however many games. And they've got a handful of those guys who have been in the program for a season or more that I think really need to pop. And if that happens, Nebraska then can kind of expand upon this, 6-7 win range, which seems to be where they're falling in most of the market.
That 7-win number can be achieved and you can get your work done early, or you can improve and finish strong and close strong despite how ominous that close is, right, with the schedule. Let's look at Adrian Martinez. Let's look at 2018, Adrian. In your opinion, why was 18 so successful for him? And let's look at the 2 middle years before this 2021, right? We've got a question mark. What are we going to get with Adrian? and some of that's on him, some of that's on the other 10 on the offensive side of the ball. Kind of put your stamp on why 18 went the way it did in your opinion, and then how did you get what you got out of 19 and 20?
Yeah, 18 in retrospect, I can't say that I felt this way at the time, looks a little bit like, with where things have gone since then, that, it's one of those things that you get with freshmen often, but particularly at quarterback, in that there's not a book on those guys yet. And as you get in later into the season, there is, but you're still figuring it out. And on top of that, it was an entirely new staff, an entirely new system, so all of the film that teams had on Nebraska, they weren't watching that going into the 2018 year. They were watching UCF stuff, and Nebraska tweaked some of that. So I think there's some of that. I mean, Adrian was he just kind of burst on the scene and really got momentum early, which I think was a big part to that year too. In 2019, it's, everyone's seen what you could do as a true freshman. So expectations get pretty high pretty quickly. And for whatever reason, injuries played a part in most of these seasons as well. But for whatever reason, that just kind of hung over things a little bit. And if you're dealing with that on a large scale, the scale that it is around Nebraska football or programs like it, it can be a lot. And then you kind of take that back away in 2020, because at that point it's just like, hey, we're happy to play football. In particular with the passing numbers in 2020 for Adrian, Nebraska didn't take a lot of shots downfield. I think that contributes, a good bit to that completion percentage number. And that's okay. If you can build on that, which is really what I think the key question at quarterback for Nebraska entering this year is, okay, can we build on what we did last year? Because last time that was the setup between 2018 and 2019. I don't think anybody walked away saying, yeah, that happened.
Brandon, has Coach Frost had the personnel in any year since he's been here to be able to run the offense that he wants? I guess the heart of this question is have we seen the offense that Frost wants at Nebraska since he's been here, or are we still waiting him to have the right personnel? Because it feels like the offenses look just a little bit different every single year.
Yeah, it has, and I don't think you can say on a broad scale that they've had an offense where you're like, yeah, that's the one. That's what it's supposed to look like. So here, things should really uptick. And I don't know if I would say that going into 2021. The wide receiver core is enticing, but it's still largely unproven. So, I think myself, like a lot of people, want to see a little bit there before jumping in wholesale on that. Running back might even be a bigger one. They haven't had the kind of the type of running back, I don't think, that is perfect for what they're trying to do. And we've seen that with, shuffling through guys, and you've had guys transfer out, and you've had guys leave for other reasons. So yeah, the personnel hasn't been perfect. And I will say that's kind of college football though, right? The roster churn is remarkable at this level. And the coaches who succeed and do the best are the ones that either run a system or have created kind of the program culture, for lack of a better term, where those things are minimized. And when you look back at the Nebraska teams of old, more and more for me, that becomes the thing that stands out, is not just the remarkability of the results, which speak for themselves, but how, okay, you lost a major player, one of the best players in program history. Here's who's coming next. And the drop-off, was rarely so big that you were still talking about it at the end of the year.
Brandon Vogel's with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine managing editor and author with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion. Nebraska just reloaded. They reloaded it at defensive line. They reloaded it at safety. They reloaded at quarterback. They reloaded on the offensive line. And we can say reload, but it had been a 2 to 3 year development process or phase in a lot of instances where guys were sprinkled in and got a lot of reps in practice, and then got when it was go time, they were ready and pretty confident. And we'll see where Nebraska can go in 2021. Vogues, so the mailbag question in today's HailVarsity.com mailbag posting is this: if beer is allowed at Memorial Stadium or PBA, how many beers would you consume? at each game. And everybody with Hail Varsity answered except one Brandon L. Vogel. Now, no one asked me, but if I could have a cocktail during the game, I would limit myself to one per quarter, fair to say, or one, maybe 3 or 3.5 for basketball. Depending on how the game's going, we can go 3 to 4 for football. There's my number. What is your number? Many of the Hail Varsity staff, Aaron Sorensen, bless her heart, Mike Babcock, Greg Smith, Jacob Padilla, Derek Peterson, Dr. Petey, no one was going to get sloppy. Many said, you know what, I'm working, I'm not going to have one. If there would have been beer at halftime of the Nebraska-Colorado game in 2019, we would have cracked one because it was 21-0. It would have been great. So what's your number? What is your final answer?
Am I working or am I watching the game in the stands?
If you're working and you're thirsty and say there's no soda or water, all you have is beer.
Yeah. If I'm working, it would be nice to, all line up and pour a draft at halftime and just kind of sip it through the second half. And Aaron mentioned that Illinois last time we were there, they did have post game beers, which was the first time I had encountered that. And it was nice to be like, okay, well, we're working on and editing 5-6 different stories post game, and you just sip the beer. So that was good. I think. Even if I was in the stands, though, I would try to do 1.5. Okay. And, if things like in kind of a classic old school Nebraska fashion where you just break things open in the third quarter, maybe then you're like, I'm going to do one more before they shut this off because things are going well.
That's right. There we go. So pacing himself 1 per half. If it's time for the fifth teamers to get on the field, maybe you order one more. We're going to do that math and say... We'll say two. Beers for Brandon Vogel.
A big question is it IPA or is it like Busch Light? Because those IPAs just hit a lot harder. That's the thing. Is that just me being a young person?
No, I don't think so. I like IPAs, but I would agree with you. Like if we're talking a stadium beer, just kind of a nice crisp lager or light ale is the way I would go. It just pairs better, I think, with watching from the stands.
It is probably $17 cheaper to go with a nice crisp lager as well. I'm going to go the cheap route, man. That's where I'm going. Vogues, we'll talk Saturday. Fun to get caught up. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, there he is, Brandon Vogel, managing editor, HailVarsity.com and magazine. We'll continue this beer discussion, also some NBA thoughts.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Okay, we will get to a steak and a beer wager, Phoenix-Milwaukee Game 2, but okay, we're going to get into beers for football, and if beer's allowed at Memorial Stadium or PBA, how many are you going to consume at each game? That was a Hail Varsity mailbag question. The massive response by the Hail Varsity work staff was, dude, I'm working, I can't drink during work. That is our brilliant writing staff from a radio standpoint. I'm not going to point fingers and throw in a guy's named Elijah under the bus or anything. But seriously, I mean, you're still in college. You've worked most of the games for Husker Vision, so you weren't partying. But there's been a game or two you've gone as a student, as a fan.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, of legal age. So... that day will come, and it really just kind of comes down to convenience. You have the beer guy, like the Dr. Pepper dude wandering around. Is there a beer guy there within shouting distance?
Get your Busch Light, get your Bud Light.
See, and that's it. Like, if I'm stuck buying Busch Light, sorry to go uppity, then I'll go with that. But I'll spend more on hopefully a Kincaid or a Zipline or something. And I'm not Mr. IPA guy either. I'll get a Kolsch or something like that.
See, the problem is those heavy beers. I'm 2 or 3 deep at a game, and I'm texting my ex instead of focusing on the game. Like I need to keep it light.
Really? We're just gonna take your phone away from you. You can have 7 beers, but part of the payment is hand your phone off so you're not going, what did I do? The next day. So let's dive into this NBA game finals, game 2 action. The line right now is Phoenix minus 4.5. We'll let that marinate for a second. So what will we see different from Milwaukee? What will we see different from Phoenix? And do we have some of the Greek Freak? What type of game do you get out of Giannis in a second game setting here? He looks fine. Does he continue to stay injury-free? Giannis, after game 1, touched on being able to play through what was a scary situation with his knee.
I'm just happy, man. When I went down, I thought I'm going to be out for the year. I thought I turned hurt everything in my knee. And just being able to be on the bench and not being at cold table, getting surgery, and supporting those guys, watching the game and walking around and cheering with them. Obviously, my competitive side will want to play, but at the end of the day, you always got to find the positive things in everything that you go through in order for you to move forward. I'm happy that they were able to, get the job done. They played great. They played together. I was extremely proud for the team, and I'm happy that I have opportunity to be out there with them again and finish what we started.
We caught the edit. His alarm goes off. He's like, oh, yeah. So long and short, hey, he was just thrilled to be out there. Wasn't thrilled with the result. And quite honestly, Milwaukee was in that game. The third quarter was the difference.
It was until that end of the third quarter, Giannis went and sat on the bench for a little bit, and it felt like the Suns just won a 20-0 run.
Right, and they had to manage his minutes. He was only at mid-30s versus 40-plus for some of the other starters. But can Giannis feel good for going into this game? You've had a little bit of rest. Can you feel good after game 2? I don't know that Milwaukee's got to have tonight, but it'd be a lot cooler to Bucks fans if they did. One thing Chris Paul knows is the preparation's been the difference here for this Phoenix team. They were ready for what they were going to see in game 1.
I've said it all season long. One thing that we're going to be is prepared. We're going to be prepared for every game. So, we always talk about, when preparation meets opportunity. So, shoot around. Coach said go hoop. Y'all know what to do.
Well, what Milwaukee traditionally has done is get up and down the floor. They've been great in transition. Well, Phoenix was better. Phoenix was better in that part of the game. Free throws were a difference. Not only Giannis is going to struggle from there, but you had a 10 free throw attempt disparity. So does Milwaukee focus on trying to get more to the rim? You had Middleton, who really did well offensively, but it was a volume night versus an efficiency night. Scored 29, took 26 shots to get there. Here's what can't happen for Milwaukee. They can't hang, or they shouldn't try and hang with Phoenix and this switching D. Because when Chris Paul went off, 16 of his 32 points, he was picking who was guarding him. Every time on that pick and roll, Milwaukee'd switch, and a lot of times CP3'd have some big guy on him. He'd either get by to the rim or dish off, or he'd be able to step back and drill a 3. Brook Lopez was on him a couple of times. It didn't work out well. And look.
I had nightmares of Jokic trying to guard Chris Paul 2 rounds ago. It's what the Suns have been doing all playoffs.
And how do you kind of die by 1,000 paper cuts and switch more on a minimal basis? Or do you just kind of get pulverized with some of your matchups if you stick with some hard assignments versus the free-flowing switch? And that's just it. Lopez and some of the other bigs from Milwaukee are big athletic guys. They're absolutely great athletes. But push comes to shove, CP3 is going to work everybody and anybody. That's just not fair. Isn't fair on top of the fact Booker's chipping in his 27. Anton knows his role. Well, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. 4.5. Milwaukee's getting the points. Phoenix giving the points. The double or nothing steak and a beer bet. Elijah Herbel, you do the honors.
Oh, you're going to let me do it again?
Yeah, what do you want? Who you taking? What are you feeling here? What am I stuck with?
Well, you're putting all the pressure on me here, and
you're up.
Yeah, I know.
First time in like forever.
I liked what I saw out of Milwaukee for about the first half, and they weren't even terrible in the fourth quarter. They kept things somewhat close. It was that one big run that Phoenix just tends to go on in the third. Maybe Milwaukee's gonna be a little bit more ready for it. I'm leaning towards Milwaukee, but 4.5. If it was 6.5 like it was on Wednesday, I would go Milwaukee all day. 4.5's a little bit tighter. That makes me nervous, but I think I'll go Milwaukee 4.5.
So you're taking okay. You're taking the Bucks and the 4.5.
I'm taking.
You want Phoenix and you're laying the 4.5, or you're taking the Bucks and getting the 4.5.
I'm getting the 4.5.
Okay, so you're taking Milwaukee.
Yeah.
You're taking Milwaukee to cover.
I don't necessarily think Milwaukee wins, but I think it is closer this time.
It's a 3-point
Three-point game, something like that. So I'll take. Part of me thinks it's like Milwaukee is going to lose by like 5.
Sure.
That's why I think 6.5 would
make
kill
me happy. That would make me happy.
I'll go with Milwaukee then.
Okay, that's fine. I'm quite happy to give that to you.
You happy rooting for the Suns tonight?
Yeah, I'll root for the Suns. We have Jacob Padilla tomorrow. If I tell him tomorrow that I was rooting for Milwaukee, he may never speak to me again. I'll just, again, say, well, Elijah's a Bucks fan.
No, the Suns are so much more fun to watch than the Bucks. I'll give you that. Giannis, he's incredible, but...
You don't like his style? You don't like bully ball?
It just bully ball and go draw the foul. And sometimes you get so tired of it.
We'll wind down a Thursday next on Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at hailvarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, and I have missed her. We say hi to Deb, the spa lady, Home Innovation Spas, 20th and Highway 2 in Lincoln, off Industrial Road in Omaha. Spasonline.com. Deb, with this yo-yoing of the temperature, it's cold tub, it's hot tub time, but guess what? You've got a temperature gauge to make it work for everybody. How are you?
I'm doing great, and yes, that's right. You could just adjust that temperature up or down and enjoy it year-round. That's the great thing about a spa or a swim spa. And I know there's a lot of young kids out there that, their dreams are to become Olympian swimmers. They've been watching the Olympic swim trials and dreaming of that. Well, if you can't get to a pool year-round, maybe the smaller towns around here, their pool isn't open year-round. So you can have one in your own yard, your only backyard. You go back out there, you train year-round, and who knows, you could be accepting a gold medal for the United States.
That would be wonderful, and the swim spa is just that. And, Deb, you've got one on the showroom floor, and it is perfect. Let's just highlight and underline year-round because, like you were just touching on, the temperature doesn't matter if it's snowing outside. You put the old swimmer's cap on, you fire up the goggles, and you just get your laps in.
That's right. You do it. You can have that enjoyment and that workout year-round. And then if you want to sit back and relax, turn the temperature up, and enjoy the therapy seats. So really, it's the best of both worlds.
Deb, Swim Spa is an amazing option. Home Innovation Spas, 20th and Highway 2 in Lincoln off Industrial Road in Omaha, spasonline.com. Deb, the spa lady. Deb, you have other options, too, that are fantastic. You have the two-seater and beyond. You have a hot tub for the neighborhood. You have a hot tub for the family. And you have a hot tub for mama and daddy.
That's right. You have a You have one for the loners. So we've got one for everybody. And
all those Denver fans, right?
Yeah.
Hey, now.
Hey, we won't go there.
That was me.
But I would say our most popular size is a 7-foot by 7-foot spa, and it's going to seat 5 to 6 people. That's just a very common, normal size, and we've got a lot of different varieties of that tub. Bigger ones, little ones, we've got it all.
Deb, when can folks come see you? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, we're open 10 to 6 Monday through Friday and 10 to 4 on Saturday. And you can go to our website. That is spasonline.com.
All right, Deb, we will talk next week. Thanks for the time today.
Okay, take care now. Bye-bye.
Right. Deb, the spa lady. Go see Deb, 20th and Highway 2 in Lincoln, Home Innovation Spas. If you're in Omaha, off Industrial Road in Omaha, log on, spasonline.com. That showroom's awesome. Deb has jumped into a swim spa, and it's massive. It's huge. And yeah, if you have the just you and you want a 2-seater, it's right there. We won't call it the Elway.
So I mean, like, is there like a sidecar option, like for like a motorcycle? Can you have like side by side spas?
You that would be all right.
Where one's like a swim spa, and one's like a chillin' spa.
You could. I think the therapy seat in the swim spa is kind of like its own little lagoon area. All right, good stuff today. Brad Edwards, incredible. Same with Greg Smith and Brandon Vogel. Back tomorrow at 4. Thanks.